The research vessel Aurora drifted through the dark void of space, its sensors scanning the distant stars. Inside the ship, Jake Morrison sat in the xenobiology lab, reviewing data from their latest planetary survey. He was tired. 3 months in deep space could do that to a person. The alarm shattered the quiet. Red lights flashed across every corridor. Jake jumped from his seat and ran toward the bridge. His heart pounded as he climbed the metal stairs 2 at a time. Captain Helen Burke stood at the center of the bridge, her face illuminated by the main view screen. "What do we have?" she asked. "Distress signal, Captain," said Melissa Torres from the communications station. "Unknown origin. The language is nothing in our database." Jake pushed through the bridge crew to get a better look. The signal pulsed in strange, rhythmic patterns. Beautiful, almost musical. He had never seen anything like it. "Distance?" Helen asked. 200,000 kilometers and closing," replied the navigation officer. "Captain, they're coming toward us." Helen took a deep breath. "Battle stations. Prepare for first contact protocol." Jake felt his stomach tighten. First contact. The words humanity had been waiting centuries to say. And now it was happening on his watch. The alien vessel appeared on the view screen an hour later. It was elegant, curved like a seashell, with surfaces that seemed to shimmer between silver and purple. Nothing like the angular human ships. "They're hailing us," Melissa said, her voice shaking slightly. "Open a channel," Helen ordered. The view screen changed. A figure appeared, and Jake heard several crew members gasp. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her face had delicate features covered in short, silver fur. Large violet eyes studied them with obvious intelligence. Her ears, pointed and mobile, sat high on her head. She looked like a human blended with a cat, but there was nothing cute or domesticated about her. She radiated authority. "I am Lyra of the Velhari," she said. Her voice was smooth, with a purring undertone. "Our ship has suffered damage. We request permission to board and discuss repairs." Helen glanced at Jake. He nodded. "Permission granted," Helen said. "We'll meet you in Docking Bay 2. Jake stood in the docking bay 30 minutes later, flanked by Lieutenant Danny Walsh and 2 other security officers. Dr. Eric Santos, the chief medical officer, stood beside Jake. Eric was his closest friend on the ship, and Jake was glad to have him there. "You okay?" Eric whispered. "Just nervous," Jake admitted. "What if I mess this up?" "You won't. You're the best xenobiologist in the fleet." The airlock hissed open. Lyra stepped through, followed by 2 other Velhari. She was taller than Jake had expected, nearly 6 feet. She wore a form-fitting suit that seemed to shift colors with her movements. "Welcome to the Aurora," Jake said, extending his hand. "I'm Jake Morrison, xenobiology specialist. I'll be your liaison during your stay." Lyra looked at his hand for a moment, then grasped it. Her palm was warm, her grip firm. "A pleasure," she said. Jake led her through the ship, explaining the layout and basic systems. She asked intelligent questions, her violet eyes taking in every detail. Her ears moved constantly, swiveling toward different sounds. They reached the mess hall, and Jake gestured to the various food stations. "We can accommodate most biochemistries," he explained. "If you tell us your dietary needs, we'll prepare appropriate meals." Lyra nodded, but her attention seemed elsewhere. Her ears flicked backward, then forward. Jake thought to himself, "Those ears are fascinating. I wonder if she can hear my heartbeat from there." Lyra's head turned sharply toward him. A small smile played at her lips. Her ears focused directly on him. Jake blinked. Coincidence, he told himself. They continued the tour. In the engineering section, Jake found himself thinking, "I really hope she doesn't notice the coolant leak we've been trying to fix." Lyra's eyes moved to the exact panel where the leak was located. "Is there a problem with that system?" she asked, pointing. Minor issue," Jake stammered. "How did you know?" "I am observant," she said simply. In the observation deck, Jake stood beside her as she gazed at the stars. He thought about how strange this was, how surreal. "This is impossible," he thought. "Aliens. Real aliens. And she looks like someone mixed a human with a Persian cat. Lyra turned so fast that Jake stepped back. Her violet eyes locked onto his, and there was something knowing in her gaze. Something that made his skin prickle. "You have many thoughts, Jake Morrison," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She stepped closer. Her ears rotated toward him, focusing like satellite dishes. "I mean that your mind is very loud." Jake's blood ran cold. "Are you saying you can read my thoughts?" Lyra tilted her head, studying him like he was a specimen under a microscope. "Read is perhaps not the correct word. Here is more accurate." "That's impossible," Jake said aloud this time. "Is it?" Lyra's tail, which Jake had barely noticed before, swished behind her. "You have been thinking many things during our tour. Some of them quite amusing." Jake felt heat rush to his face. "How long have you been listening to my thoughts?" Lyra's smile widened, showing slightly pointed teeth. "Since the moment we met." She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a purr. "Careful, human. I can hear everything." Jake stood frozen as she walked away, her tail swishing behind her. His mind raced with every embarrassing thought he had experienced in the last 2 hours. This first contact was going to be much more complicated than he had imagined. Jake could not sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered Lyra's words. She could hear his thoughts. Everything. He lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, trying desperately to think about nothing at all. It did not work. By morning, he had a plan. He needed to test this. To know for certain. He found Lyra in the guest quarters section, speaking with one of her crew members. When she saw Jake, she dismissed the other Velhari with a gesture. "Good morning, Jake Morrison," she said. "You did not sleep well. Your thoughts were very active. You can hear me even when I'm not near you?" Jake asked, alarmed. "No. But I can see the evidence on your face." She gestured to a chair. "Sit. You have questions." Jake sat, his mind racing. He decided to try something. He looked directly at her and thought as clearly as he could, "Can you really hear this?" Lyra's ears swiveled forward. "Yes. Quite clearly." Jake thought, "What number am I thinking of?" He pictured the number 7 in his mind. "7," Lyra said aloud. His hands gripped the armrests. He thought of his childhood dog, a golden retriever named Buddy. "A pleasant memory," Lyra said softly. "The animal brought you joy." Jake stood abruptly. "This is impossible. Telepathy doesn't exist. It can't exist." "And yet, here I am," Lyra said calmly. "Jake, please sit. I understand this is difficult for you." He sat, but his leg bounced nervously. "Explain it to me. How does this work?" Lyra settled into her chair, her tail curling around her feet. "For the Velhari, telepathy is as natural as speech is for you. We evolved it millions of years ago. It became our primary form of communication. Speaking aloud, as I do with you now, is actually quite unusual for us." "So you're reading my mind right now?" "Everything. Not reading. Hearing. There is a difference." She paused. "Think of it like sound. When you speak, everyone nearby can hear you unless you whisper. Thoughts are similar. Most beings think loudly without realizing it." "Most beings? You mean other species are telepathic too?" "No. But we can hear them regardless. Their thoughts broadcast whether they know it or not." Lyra leaned forward. "However, not all beings broadcast equally. Some are quiet, barely a whisper. Others, like you, are quite loud." Jake felt sick. "How loud am I?" "Very. Your thoughts reach me from several rooms away when they are particularly strong." He put his head in his hands. "Oh God. What have you heard?" "Many things. Your concern for your crew. Your excitement about our meeting. Your uncertainty about your career path. Your attraction to the communications officer, though you have never acted on it." Jake's face burned. "Melissa. You heard that?" "Yes." "And your worry that you are not good enough for this assignment. Your fear that you will fail." Lyra's voice softened. And your wonder at the beauty of the stars. That thought is quite lovely. This is a violation, Jake said, standing again. You've been invading my privacy since we met. I understand your anger, Lyra said, rising as well. But I have been protecting you. Protecting me? From what? From my crew hearing you as well. I have been shielding your thoughts, filtering them so only I receive them clearly. Without my intervention, every Velhari on this ship would hear you constantly. Jake felt the room spin. He sat down hard. There are 6 Velhari on board. Yes. And all of them would hear your loudest thoughts without my shields. I thought it kinder to spare you that. He looked up at her. Can you teach me to stop broadcasting? Perhaps. Some beings can learn to quiet their minds. It requires discipline and practice. Before Jake could respond, the ship's intercom crackled. Jake Morrison to the briefing room. Captain's orders. Jake and Lyra walked to the briefing room in silence. Inside, Captain Helen Burke sat at the head of the table. Eric Santos was there, along with Commander Paul Griffin, the ship's military advisor, and several senior officers. Sit down, both of you, Helen said. Her tone was serious. Jake took a seat. Lyra stood behind him. Helen looked between them. Dr. Santos has informed me of a discovery. Jake, apparently you've been in telepathic contact with our guest. It's not exactly voluntary on my part, Jake said. Explain, Griffin demanded. He was a broad man with a hard face and suspicious eyes. Jake told them everything. As he spoke, he watched Griffin's expression grow darker. This is unacceptable, Griffin said when Jake finished. Captain, this species has been reading our minds without permission. This is espionage. We should detain them immediately. We did not ask for this ability, Lyra said calmly. We simply hear what is broadcast to us. Would you blame someone for hearing words spoken aloud? Thoughts aren't speech, Griffin snapped. To us, they are identical, Lyra replied. Eric spoke up. Captain, I've been running tests. Based on Lyra's descriptions, I estimate only 30% of humans broadcast thoughts clearly enough for the Velhari to hear. Jake is one of them. Most of our crew is essentially invisible to their telepathy. That doesn't make this acceptable, Griffin said. Helen held up her hand for silence. Lyra, can your people control what they hear? To an extent. We can choose not to listen closely, much as you can choose not to pay attention to a conversation. But we cannot make ourselves deaf to thoughts any more than you can make yourselves deaf to sound. Helen looked at Jake. Can you work with this? Jake met Lyra's violet eyes. Despite everything, he saw no malice there. Only honesty. Yes, he said. I can try. Then we proceed with diplomatic relations, Helen said. But Lyra, I need your word that anything you hear will be treated as confidential unless it poses a security threat. You have my word, Lyra said. Griffin stood abruptly. This is a mistake, Captain. He left the room. Jake watched him go, and for the first time since meeting Lyra, he deliberately thought something. I don't trust him. Lyra's ears flicked. Neither do I, she murmured. Over the next week, Jake spent hours each day with Lyra learning to control his thoughts. She taught him meditation techniques that the Velhari used to shield themselves from the constant noise of other minds. Imagine a wall, Lyra instructed. They sat cross-legged on the floor of the observation deck. Not to keep thoughts in, but to make them quieter. Like lowering your voice. Jake tried. He pictured a wall of stone, thick and solid. For a moment, Lyra's ears relaxed slightly. Better, she said. I can still hear you, but you are not shouting anymore. How long did it take your people to learn this? Jake asked. We are born with some instinct for it. But full control takes years of practice. She tilted her head. You are learning faster than I expected. Humans may be more adaptable than we thought. They had become something like friends. Jake found himself enjoying their conversations, both spoken and thought. Lyra had a dry sense of humor that surprised him. She was also genuinely curious about humanity. Your species fascinates me, she said during one session. You developed technology without any telepathic ability. That is quite rare in the galaxy. How many telepathic species are there? Jake asked. That we know of. 14. Most civilizations have at least some telepathic members. You are an anomaly. Jake was about to ask another question when Melissa Torres entered the observation deck. Jake, sorry to interrupt. Captain wants to see you. Thanks, Melissa. Jake stood, brushing off his pants. Melissa smiled at him, and Jake felt a familiar warmth. He quickly tried to quiet his thoughts, but Lyra's amused expression told him he had failed. Later that evening, a formal dinner was arranged between the human senior staff and the Velhari delegation. The mess hall had been decorated as nicely as possible for a research vessel. Real plates instead of disposable ones. Even flowers that Eric had been growing in the botany lab. Jake sat between Eric and Lyra. Across the table, Commander Griffin ate in silence, his eyes constantly on the Velhari guests. Captain Helen raised her glass. To new friendships and mutual understanding. Everyone drank. The conversation flowed easily. The Velhari were interested in human food, though they could only eat certain items. Lyra tried a strawberry and proclaimed it delightfully strange. Jake was starting to relax when Lyra suddenly went rigid beside him. Her ears pinned back against her head. Her tail bushed out. Lyra, Jake whispered. What's wrong? Her hand gripped his arm, claws extending slightly. Then, clear as day, her voice sounded in his mind. Not spoken aloud, but thought directly to him. Do not react. Someone here plans to betray us. I hear thoughts of sabotage. Violence. Jake's heart hammered. He took a sip of water, trying to appear calm. He thought back to her. Who? I cannot tell yet. The thought was brief. But someone at this table wants to destroy the alliance between our peoples. Jake looked around the table. Everyone seemed normal. Helen was talking with one of the Velhari about propulsion systems. Eric was explaining human medical technology. Melissa laughed at something another officer said. Griffin sat still, his face unreadable. Jake thought to Lyra, what should we do? For now, nothing. We must be certain. A false accusation could start a war. The dinner ended without incident. But Jake could not shake the cold feeling in his gut. Over the next 2 days, Jake and Lyra conducted a secret investigation. They could not tell Captain Helen without proof. They could not risk panic among the crew. Lyra listened constantly, filtering through the thoughts of everyone aboard. It was exhausting for her, Jake could see. Her ears drooped by evening. Anything? Jake asked on the second night. Fragments. Someone is communicating with people off the ship. They believe telepathic species are a threat to human freedom. They plan to frame me as a danger. Griffin, Jake said. I believe so. But I need to hear him think it clearly. Telepathy can be used as evidence, but only if I am certain. The breakthrough came the next morning. Jake was in the lab when Lyra burst through the door. Her fur was standing on end. I heard him. Griffin is transmitting our coordinates to a human faction that opposes alien contact. They are coming. A fleet. They plan to destroy my ship and blame it on a Velhari attack. We have to tell Helen, Jake said. They ran to the bridge. Helen listened to their report, her face growing pale. You are certain? She asked Lyra. Completely. I heard every detail. He is in communication with them now, from his quarters. Helen activated the ship-wide intercom. Security team to Commander Griffin's quarters. Immediately. Griffin was found with a hidden communication device, an illegal model not registered with the ship. When confronted, he smiled coldly. You're fools, he said. All of you. These creatures are invading our minds. They'll control us, manipulate us. I'm trying to save humanity. By starting a war? Helen demanded. By preventing enslavement. Griffin was taken to the brig. But the damage was done. The faction's fleet was already approaching. Helen checked the sensors and her face went white. 12 ships, she said. All armed. They'll be here in 6 hours. Jake looked at Lyra. Can your people help? I have already sent a distress call to the nearest Velhari vessel, but they are 14 hours away. Then we're on our own, Helen said. Jake felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Humanity's first contact was about to end in violence, unless they could find another way. He looked at Lyra, and an idea formed in his mind. Can you amplify my thoughts? He asked. Make them loud enough for everyone to hear? Lyra's ears perked up. Yes, but it would be intense. For you and for anyone receiving. Can you broadcast them to those ships? Understanding dawned in her violet eyes. Yes. If you are willing. Jake took a deep breath. Let's save this alliance. The bridge hummed with tension as the faction fleet grew closer on the view screen. 12 ships, all bearing weapons designed to destroy, not explore. Jake stood beside Lyra, his palms sweating. Explain exactly what will happen, Captain Helen said. Lyra's tail swished nervously. I will connect my mind to Jake's. Then I will amplify his thoughts and broadcast them to every ship in range. Both ours and theirs. Everyone will hear what he's thinking. Eric asked. Yes. It will be overwhelming for most humans. Like having someone speak directly into their brain. But it will be undeniable. Impossible to ignore or dismiss. Helen looked at Jake. You understand what you're volunteering for? Your thoughts, your feelings, everything exposed to thousands of people. Jake nodded, though fear twisted in his stomach. It's the only way to reach them. To make them understand. We could fight, suggested Lieutenant Danny Walsh from the weapons station. The Aurora has defensive capabilities. Against 12 military vessels? We would last minutes, Helen said. She turned back to Jake. Are you sure about this? No, Jake admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. Melissa stood from her station. Captain, I want to volunteer too. I've been working with Lyra. She says I might be telepathically capable. Maybe 2 voices are better than 1. Lyra's ears swiveled toward Melissa. You are quieter than Jake, but yes, you have the potential. However, this will be painful. Your mind is not accustomed to this kind of connection. I can handle pain, Melissa said firmly. Helen looked between them, then nodded. Do it. We have 20 minutes before they're in weapons range. Jake and Melissa stood facing Lyra in the center of the bridge. The crew cleared a space around them. Lyra reached out, placing one hand on Jake's temple and the other on Melissa's. Close your eyes, she instructed. Clear your mind as much as possible. I will do the rest. Jake closed his eyes. He felt Lyra's presence in his mind, gentle at first, like a whisper. Then it grew stronger. He gasped as their consciousness merged. He could feel Lyra's thoughts, her concern for her crew, her hope for peace. He could feel Melissa's determination, her fear, her courage. And beneath it all, a vast network of Velhari minds from the damaged ship, all connected, all aware. Now, Lyra's voice echoed in his head. Think what you want them to hear. Make it true. Make it real. Jake gathered his thoughts. He thought about the moment he first saw Earth from space as a child, visiting the lunar colony with his parents. The overwhelming beauty of the blue marble hanging in the void. He thought about why he became a xenobiologist. The dream of meeting other minds, other perspectives, other ways of seeing the universe. He thought about Lyra. His fear when he learned she could hear his thoughts. The violation he felt. But then the understanding that grew. The friendship. The realization that being truly known by another being, even one so different, was not weakness but strength. He thought about humanity's potential. Not as conquerors or isolationists, but as partners in a vast cosmic community. Now I broadcast, Lyra's voice said. Energy surged through Jake. His thoughts exploded outward like a supernova. He felt them touch thousands of minds across the approaching fleet. Felt their shock, their resistance, their gradual understanding. On the view screen, the lead ship of the faction fleet slowed. Melissa added her thoughts to Jake's. She thought about her grandmother, who fled a war-torn country to find peace. About the importance of facing fear with open hands instead of closed fists. About the future she wanted for humanity, standing among the stars alongside new friends. The connection intensified. Jake could feel the minds aboard the faction ships. Some were angry, resistant. Others were confused. Many were afraid. One mind stood out, the fleet commander. Jake felt her thoughts. A woman named Linda Hart, former military, lost her son to a colony accident. She blamed aliens for humanity's expansion into dangerous space. She carried so much pain. Jake thought directly to her. He did not use words. He used feelings. Understanding. Empathy. He showed her his own fears, his own doubts. He showed her Lyra's kindness, the Velhari's genuine desire for peace. He showed her what could be gained and what could be lost. The bridge was silent except for Lyra's soft breathing. Sweat ran down Jake's face. His head throbbed. Then, crackling over the communication system, a voice. "Aurora, this is Commander Linda Hart of the Independent Vessel Freedom's call. Requesting permission to speak with your captain." Helen stepped forward. "This is Captain Helen Burke." "Go ahead, Commander. We're standing down our weapons. Not all of us, but most. I need to speak with the human who just touched my mind. And the alien who made it possible." Jake opened his eyes. Lyra released her grip on him and Melissa. Both humans staggered, and Eric rushed forward to steady them. "I'm here, Commander," Jake said hoarsely. "So is Lyra." "What you showed us," Linda's voice was rough with emotion. "Was it real?" "Every thought," Jake said. "Every feeling. That's who we are. That's who the Velhari are. Imperfect. Sometimes afraid. But trying." Silence stretched for long seconds. "3 of my ships are retreating. They won't listen to reason," Linda said finally. "But the rest of us want to talk. Really talk. Not through weapons targeting systems." Helen looked at Jake, pride clear in her eyes. "Then dock with us, Commander. Let's talk." As the faction ships began maneuvering for peaceful approach, a new signal appeared on the sensors. Ambassador Kira's Velhari vessel had arrived early, having pushed their engines beyond safe limits to reach them. "It seems everyone wants to be part of this conversation," Lyra said softly, her hand briefly touching Jake's shoulder. Jake watched the ships gather, human and Velhari together. His head still ached from the telepathic broadcast. But his heart felt light. They had prevented a war. Now came the harder part. Building a peace. 3 weeks after the standoff, the Aurora had become something unprecedented. A gathering place for 2 species learning to understand each other. The mess hall had been converted into a conference room. Humans and Velhari sat together, discussing everything from trade agreements to cultural exchange. Ambassador Kira, an older Velhari with gray-streaked fur, led the Velhari delegation with patient wisdom. Commander Linda Hart had become an unexpected ally. Her ships had joined the Aurora as unofficial protection while the talks continued. She sat with Jake during breaks, asking questions about his telepathic experiences. "Does it get easier?" she asked one afternoon. "Being heard like that?" "Yes and no," Jake said honestly. "I'm learning to shield better. But there's something freeing about it too. When you know someone can hear your real thoughts, there's no point in lying. Not to them or to yourself." Linda nodded slowly. "What you showed us out there. The truth of it. I've never experienced anything like that." "It scared me at first," Jake admitted. "Being that vulnerable. But Lyra taught me something. Vulnerability isn't weakness when it's shared." Across the room, Lyra was speaking with Eric. They had become unlikely friends as well. Eric had been studying Velhari biology, fascinated by how their telepathic abilities worked on a neurological level. "Remarkable," Eric was saying, looking at scans on his tablet. "Your brain structures are completely different from ours, but there are analogous regions that seem to process similar functions." "We believe telepathy evolved from enhanced mirror neurons," Lyra explained. "Over millions of years, the ability to sense others' emotional states became the ability to hear their thoughts directly." "Could humans develop it?" Eric asked. "Perhaps. Jake and Melissa have shown that some humans have latent potential. With training and time, maybe even genetic adaptation, your species might develop the ability naturally." "That would change everything," Eric said quietly. Yes, Lyra agreed. Which is why this alliance is so important. We can help guide you through that transition. We remember when our own people first gained this ability. It was not easy. Captain Helen approached Jake later that day with news. Earth wants you to come home. They're calling you a hero. First human to establish telepathic contact with an alien species. Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. I don't feel like a hero. I just did what needed doing. That's usually what heroes say, Helen smiled. But there's more. They want you to head a new program. Training other humans who have telepathic potential. Building a corps of liaisons who can work with the Velhari and eventually other species. What about my work here? This would be your work. Jake, you've become the bridge between our species. That's more important than any research project. Jake looked around the conference room. At humans and Velhari working together. At Melissa, who had volunteered to be the second trainee. At Lyra, who had risked so much to help humanity understand. I'll do it, he said. On one condition. Lyra has to be the primary instructor. Helen nodded. I think she'd insist on that anyway. That evening, Jake found Lyra in the observation deck. It had become their unofficial meeting place. She stood before the viewport, watching the stars. They want me to go back to Earth, Jake said, joining her. To train others like me. I know, Lyra said. I could hear you thinking about it all day. Jake smiled. He had gotten used to that. Will you come? To Earth. To help train them? Lyra's ears swiveled toward him. Is that what you want? Yes. But more than that, it's what humanity needs. You've already taught me so much. Not just about telepathy, but about trust. About being open to the unknown. You have taught me as well, Lyra said softly. Before I met your species, I thought beings without telepathy must be limited. Unable to truly connect. But you have shown me that connection takes many forms. Your friendship, your loyalty, your courage. All of this exists without telepathy. They stood in comfortable silence, watching stars drift past. I was terrified that day on the docking bay, Jake thought to her, not speaking aloud. When you told me you could hear everything. I know, Lyra thought back. I heard that fear clearly. But now, I think it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Being truly known by someone. Even the parts one wanted to hide. Lyra turned to face him fully. Her violet eyes reflected the starlight. That is the gift of telepathy. Not the hearing, but the being heard. The knowing that you are not alone in your thoughts. Will it work? Jake asked aloud. This alliance. Can our species really learn to coexist? I believe so. There will be difficulties. Misunderstandings. Some humans will always fear telepathy. Some Velhari will always see non-telepathic species as lesser. But we will try. And trying is how all great things begin. Jake smiled. You're right. And we have something going for us. What is that? We have each other. Humans and Velhari who have already bridged the gap. Who can show others it's possible. Lyra's tail brushed against his leg in a gesture he had learned was affectionate. Yes, we do. 2 months later, Jake stood in a training facility on Earth. 20 humans sat before him, all tested and confirmed to have telepathic potential. Beside him stood Lyra, Melissa, and 3 other Velhari instructors. Welcome, Jake said to the new students. You're here because you have a gift. An ability to connect with another species on a level humans have never experienced before. It will be difficult. It will be uncomfortable. You will have to face parts of yourself you might want to hide. He paused, meeting each student's eyes. But it will also be the most important thing you ever do. Because you're not just learning to use telepathy. You're building the future of humanity among the stars. Lyra stepped forward. Her ears were held high and confident. Let us begin. As the first lesson started, Jake thought back to that moment on the docking bay. When Lyra had first told him she could hear everything. He had been terrified, violated, angry. Now, he could not imagine his life any other way. He sent a thought to Lyra, clear and strong. "Thank you. For everything." She glanced at him, her eyes warm. "The gratitude is mutual, Jake Morrison. You helped save 2 species from fear. That is a gift beyond measure." The future stretched before them, uncertain and full of challenges. But they would face it together, human and Velhari, thoughts shared and barriers broken. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, more species waited to be discovered. More connections to be made. More bridges to be built. Jake smiled. He could hardly wait.